Morning, Glory, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Here is the rundown. President Biden, Russian President Putin met in Geneva. They talked, they left, they didn't agree on much. We don't really know what happened. The press conferences are interesting. I will play a little bit more for you afterwards. But the headlines are in the Wall Street Journal that they discussed prickly issues. In the New York Times, they expressed desire for better relations. In the Washington Post, Biden's strategy of pessimism ekes out progress with Putin. Well, I go along with what Dick Cheney told me on this show in 2013 or 14. Putin, he's KGB. It struck me the first time I saw him. It's never changed, and certainly his conduct over the years support that. He was a colonel in the KGB, the Soviet secret police. That's what he was and will be, I think, forever. That was Vice President Cheney to me in 2014. That's all you need to know. It's all that anyone really needs to know. He's a KGB colonel. Other news yesterday, the Fed has signaled that the first rate rise will come in 2023. Markets reacted poorly. The Dow was down 265 points. The S&P was off 22. The NASDAQ dropped 33. And overseas this morning, it's all down. What do they think? Interest rates are going to stay zero forever? So that's 2023. Look for a quarter-point rise. The Wall Street Journal headline, global markets retreat as Fed see earlier interest rate rises. And the Washington Post, Fed estimates inflation will grow faster than projected just 3 months ago. That's not news either, but it's a big headline. In the Wall Street Journal, U.S. housing market needs 5.5 million more units. Anyone who's trying to buy a house knows that. In Texas, Governor Abbott says he will build a wall along the state's border with Mexico. GM has raised its electric car bet and will add more battery factories. I wonder if they're going to do a deal with Lordstown Motors. They own Lordstown Motors until they sold it to Lordstown Motors. So we'll see if that comes back again. Symbol RIDE, R-I-D-E, had a nice bump again yesterday. I own that. I like that. From the Wall Street Journal, in Netflix world, movie studios make more movies than ever. Is that a good thing? Well, we won't know for a while. Congress votes overwhelmingly to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. The day commemorates the end of slavery in Texas in 1865. It's been a 15-year fight for this. I think it's a good idea. It costs a little bit, but given the trillions that we are spending daily, it's not really a very significant amount of money. So a new federal holiday. Candidates clashed in New York City's future, in New York City over the future of it. Very few highlights in this debate. There are 8 candidates. They'll get down to 2. No one significantly damaged. Eric Adams, according to the New York Times. He's the front runner. The candidates sparred again over policing. Andrew Wang is the great progressive hope who is phasing. Housing and mental illness were dominant topics. That really means homelessness. The worst idea from a competitor may have come from Dianne Morales, but you have to wait and see what people do behind the secrecy of a ballot box. Abroad, Benjamin Netanyahu, this is a quote from a headline in the Times of Israel, a column by David Horowitz. Netanyahu's not going anywhere, and Bennett's helping him stick around. At the start of what will be a relentless fight to protect his coalition against a predecessor who is treating him despicably, the new PM is already radiating weakness. He's been prime minister for 3 days, and he's radiating weakness. In a parliamentary system, that's really the sound of doom. In the Telegraph, Great Britain today, return of holidays abroad for people who are fully vaccinated appears imminent. Double-jabbed tourists could be allowed to travel to amber-list countries without quarantining under new government plans. All of the United Kingdom exhales. They don't really consider the summer in Great Britain unless they go to an island and get horribly sunburned. Hong Kong, bad news. The police invoke security law to arrest senior journalists at Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai's newspaper. At least 100 police raided its office on Thursday as the crackdown continues. Now let's grab a couple of quotes from Joe Biden yesterday. President Biden on the tarmac talking about, well, my interview with Mitch McConnell from Monday, cut number 18.
Mitch has been nothing but no for a long time. And and I'm sure he means exactly what he says, but we'll see.
Yeah, of course he does. He was talking to me, Mr. President. Vladimir Putin on his philosophy of life, cut number 19.
Oh, there is no happipiness in life. There's only a mirage of it on the horizon. So, cherish that.
Like Dwayne to post that in the
It's hardly
studio and as the byline of the rundown. Let's play that again because it's Vladimir Putin on life.
Oh, there is no happiness in life. There's only a mirage of it on the horizon. So, cherish that.
This Putin must have loved that one. I think there's a lot of happiness in life. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt provides most of it. God, family, and the United States of America. Maybe not for Vladimir Putin, but anyway, let's go back to the president. President Biden snapping at CNN's Caitlin Collins, cut number 2.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin framed?
You don't understand that, you're in the wrong business.
It's a summit with China.
If you don't understand that, you're in the wrong business. Now, we used to get outraged howls about press freedom, and rightly so, when President Trump said that the media was the enemy of the people. But insulting Caitlin Collins, who's doing her job and doing it well, Mr. President, come on. He came out and apologized later, but you can't get that back. Play that again. This is, first he snaps at, then he insults Caitlin Collins. And I'll tell you what I think this means in just a second. Cut number 12.
Confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin framed?
You don't understand that, you're in the wrong business.
It's a summit with China.
You know what? What the hell do you do all day? He says, if you don't understand that, you're in the wrong business. Joe Biden on the press. Here's the president confusing Trump and Putin and himself. Cut number 1.
The United States to ensure that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. We agreed to work together there because as much as Russia's interest is ours. And so how we can ensure the Arctic remains a region of cooperation rather than conflict. I caught part of President Putin's press conference, and he talked about the need for us to be able to have some kind of modus operandi.
I think President Trump may be living rent-free in somebody's head. Here is Tom Cotton on Fox commenting on what went on yesterday. Cut 17.
Yeah, Sandra, I think it was summed up best by the French president, Emmanuel Macron, a couple days ago when he said of Joe Biden, it's nice to have a president who's part of the club again. That's the real problem, is that Joe Biden seems to care more about being part of the club with a bunch of foreign leaders and international bureaucrats rather than standing up for America's jobs and prosperity and our freedoms.
All right, now I want to go quickly to cut 27 because this was the fatal flaw of yesterday.
Another area we spent a great deal of time on was cyber and cybersecurity. I talked about the proposition that certain critical infrastructure should be off limits to attack, period, by cyber or any other means. I gave them a list. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have it in front of me, 16 specific entities, 16 defined as critical infrastructure under U.S. policy.
I sure hope I'm on that list. I hope the Hugh Hewitt show is one of the 16. I don't much care about Dwayne's after show, but if the Hugh Hewitt show isn't on that 16 and we're open to Russian attack, that's really something. If you're not on that list of 16, it's an invitation to the Russians to attack you. Stay tuned, America. That was the rundown. I'm Hugh Hewitt. More coming up. Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. I'm joined this morning by Senator Roger Marshall, also Dr. Roger Marshall, Senator from Kansas. Good morning, Doctor. Senator, how are you?
Hugh, good morning. Bonjour. I like that. That's good today.
I've got to take care of my listening audience north of the border, and I always say bonjour, hi. Senator, let me ask you about, you're on appropriations. I want to get to the infrastructure bill, but before I do, let me start with the Putin-Biden meeting yesterday. What was your reaction to the beginning, the middle, the end of it?
Well, it was just a bad look for America, unfortunately, Hugh. You know, the president walked in there, a point of weakness. He had just given the Russian dictator Nord Stream an energy pipeline. So our allies are helping our enemies in that situation. And then we gave him, 45 minutes of airtime, a world stage with no American standing there beside him saying, wait, you can't say what you're saying. Basically, he used Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's talking points to compare America to terrorists and thugs. So it was a bad look for America, just a bad picture.
All right, now let's go to the appropriation. Are you part of the Gang of 10, or the 10 Republicans? They're different. The Gang of 10 is 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, and there are 10 Republicans who've signed on to the so-called bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Have you signed on already?
I have not signed on. I'm still concerned about the fine print, how we're going to pay for it. Look, infrastructure is wildly popular. Everybody in America could say, here's something that we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint. And I agree, but it's always, what do we prioritize and how are we going to pay for it? I want to reappropriate dollars from the previous COVID relief packages, the trillions of dollars that President Biden is borrowing from your grandchildren, from my grandchildren. And I think we're not there yet. So we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Now, Senator, here's my number one question. Do we get a guarantee if there is a bipartisan compromise, whether it's $900 billion or $1.2 trillion, whatever it is, if there is a compromise, does that include a guarantee that there will be no reconciliation spending? Because it seems to me crazy to negotiate against ourselves if Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are simply going to go out and jam through reconciliation everything they leave on the table in the so-called compromise.
No, reconciliation, Chuck is going to make a run at it. He's already making a run at it. I know those conversations are happening. So that will happen. And Hugh, just to push back, and this would be one thought I would give you. If we can take out the meaningful, most important priorities of the infrastructure projects out of that reconciliation bill, I think he's going to have a harder time, not have as much leverage on Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, who I got to tell you are standing tall, keeping to their word, that they're not interested in doing anything on a partisan basis.
Now, Senator, I think they are doing a great thing on the filibuster, but I don't expect them to be able to hold the line. And indeed, it would require only 1 or 2 Republicans to bolt on reconciliation if there's something that they offer them. I honestly, unless you get a promise, why in the world would we do a bipartisan bill if they can flank us? I mean, without a promise from Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. If you got a promise, that would be fine with me. But if you don't get a promise, that alarms me.
Well, I going from the other direction, if we don't do an infrastructure, we will lose some moderate Republicans possibly. I think that our moderate Republicans will stay fast if we can work out a bipartisan infrastructure plan. But the whole point here is, look, the Senate, bipartisan senators could get this job done, but somebody behind the curtain in the White House is keeping us from making any progress on it. This will be now the third legislation, really bipartisan opportunity the president will have turned down. And I say the president seems to agree when these folks, senators, walk out of these meetings, but then his staff cancels it. So I think that's where the onus is. Why does the president not want to do a bipartisan infrastructure bill?
I will move on, but when you next get together with the conference, please say, look, I'm a skeptic. I'd like to play the hood. We don't get fooled again, that we end up with the same amount that we would have started with had they just done reconciliation. So Senator Leader McConnell was on this program Monday, and heads exploded everywhere because he said simply that the same approach would apply to 2024 as applied in 2016 to Supreme Court vacancies. Did you agree with the leader's comments?
Boy, I did not see the leader's comments on that, Hugh. Can you tell me a little bit more?
He said if there's a vacancy in 2024 and Republicans have the majority, there will be no hearings and no votes on it.
Well, we'll do everything we can to confirm conservative judges on the Supreme Court. I can tell you that. And Leader McConnell's done a great job in the past, so I'd want to sit down with him. He's very shrewd, one of the best four-dimensional chess players I've ever seen. So I'd want to circle back and kind of listen to his logic there.
All right, that would just be the Scalia precedent, and he just reaffirmed it, but I'll be interested to know if it comes up in the caucus. Let me turn now to Taiwan, Senator. I'm asking almost every single elected official, have they been to Taiwan? Do they plan on going to Taiwan? Because Taiwan is in the crosshairs of the Chinese Communist Party. Have you been there before, Doctor?
I have not been to Taiwan. Probably my closest relationship was I was the district governor from Rotary when our international president was from Taiwan, and certainly was impressed with him and the Rotarians from Taiwan I met. I've just been in Congress now 4 years and a brand new senator. It is on our list. We're looking at a trip possibly this fall or winter to get there. And certainly we've sat down with the Taiwan ambassador and had discussions specifically about semiconductor production. Obviously, they're one of the world's largest semiconductor producers, and they're working on a project in Arizona now.
And my concern, of course, and Senator Cotton has articulated, as has former Secretary of State Pompeo, is that after the Winter Olympics in 2022, and we're going to come back to whether or not we ought to be going to that, they will invade, as Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea after the 2014 Winter Olympics. The policy of strategic ambiguity, for the benefit of the audience, protects the Chinese Communist Party right now. We have agreed to defend Taiwan, but not explicitly. Ought we to make that guarantee explicit, Senator?
Well, Hugh, that's a tough question, but the whole point here is that we're in a position of weakness. The president of the United States was the vice president when Russia invaded Crimea. There was no consequences. We reward Iran and Hamas for being bad players. So we need to be looking at this whole thing geopolitically, putting all these pieces together. You can never look at Taiwan by itself. It's a very important part of the strategic plan. We're going to have to be stronger. Look, we don't want World War III, but we do need to keep standing up for Taiwan.
Now, on appropriations, Senator, are you on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, or is that a different one from yours?
Yeah, no, I'm not on an appropriations committee, Hugh. Sorry about that.
Oh, I thought you were. Well, then talk to me a little bit about whether or not a landlocked state like Kansas really cares about the fact that our shipbuilding has fallen apart. The Shipyard Act for $35 billion apparently isn't in the infrastructure compromise it should be. The Navy is the number one deal going forward in great power competition, Senator. Are you persuaded of that?
Again, I think what we cannot do is look at any issue in a silo, looking at one issue by itself. Certainly our ports, our ability to export grains from the state of Kansas is very important to me. I think the Navy is one piece of the puzzle. I'm probably more concerned about cybersecurity and our southern border right now from a priority standpoint. How we battle China, I don't think this is necessarily just a matter of who has the most ships. I think it's much more complicated than that. I'm probably more concerned that we dominate in space and the satellites. And again, I'm going to kind of go back to this cyberspace issue as well.
Well, Senator, there's a great book by Captain Hendricks out there on the United States Navy and the constitutional obligation to stand one up. But we're supposed to be at 355 ships. We're not remotely close. I think we're now down to 282. And it's just not enough with rising sea power of China. We're going to end up in a global war for the free seas, and we're not going to have the assets that we need. Does the caucus ever get briefed on this? Because to me, it's the number one defense issue, like Taiwan is the number one threat issue.
Hugh, we do talk about national security. We've not had a discussion in several weeks about the Navy in particular, but I just would caution, under President Trump, we spent more money than we ever had. We fully funded the military. Certainly our ships are in better shape today than we were before. And I just would caution you that, is there ever enough money to satisfy, the wants of the United States? So we have to prioritize money in the military just like you prioritize a budget. I understand your concern, but I don't know. It's kind of like, go back when I was growing up and we were trying to keep up with Russia's missiles. Eventually Russia had more missiles than we did, but we were more precise.
Senator, you and I are going to, next time you're back, we're going to spend the entire segment on the Navy because, boy, could I not disagree with you more. I just could not disagree with you more, but we'll talk about it in the future. Dr. Senator Roger Marshall, go study up on that Navy. That's number one, and we have not, that was a Trump failure, actually, but we'll come back and talk about it another time. Thank you, Senator. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. 33 minutes after the hour, America, Hugh Hewitt playing happy music for Vladimir Putin because of his comments yesterday. Play them, please.
Oh, there is no happiness in life. There's only a mirage of it on the horizon. So, cherish that.
So we need more happy music for Vladimir Putin, and we need happy senators like Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. What'd you make of that, Senator? Vlad seems depressed.
Oh, well, I think that Vladimir doesn't see Joe Biden as a threat. So he feels a little bit unleashed, and he's going to speak his mind. He thinks that Biden is weak. He thinks he can beat him. He is partnering up with China, Iran, North Korea. They're, in my opinion, the new axis of evil. And these guys feel emboldened.
100%. Now, Senator, you were on Judiciary, and Leader McConnell was my guest on Monday, and he commented that should there be a vacancy in the presidential election year of 2024, he would adopt the same rule, and he was leader again, and I hope you retake the majority in November of 2022, that he would adopt the same rule as obtained in 2016 when he didn't allow hearings or votes on Merrick Garland or anyone for that matter. He said no one would. Do you support him in that position?
Yes, I do support him in that position. And, we have worked diligently to get constitutionalists on the bench. We do not want activist judges on either the Supreme Court or the federal bench. And we're going to continue to work in that vein.
Now, Senator, I want to turn to the so-called infrastructure compromise drafted by the Gang of 10, and to which now 10 Republicans have agreed. I asked Senator Marshall earlier, I will ask you, why would we do an infrastructure compromise if reconciliation is still on the table? They'll just take whatever doesn't get into the compromise and put it into the reconciliation.
Well, you're right about that. And they have the bill that they want, which is a complete redefinition of what infrastructure is. So, and the other thing, Hugh, I think you have to realize 10 people is a long way from 60 votes. And so they're pushing to get those 60 votes. I'm not going to vote for something that is going to disadvantage Tennessee, that is going to change the formulary and make them more of a donor state than they already are. I'm not going to vote for something that is going to put massive amounts of money into public transit, when in Tennessee, the family minivan is more likely to be our mass transit, if you will. We have personal cars and trucks, and we're a logistics state with a lot of heavy haul, 53-foot trailers, 33-foot trailers that are hooked into a big rig. And people want to see roads and bridges repaired. They want to see rivers cleared. They want to see runways at airports functional. They want to see our railroads, which in Memphis we have all 5 Class A railroads that cross. There are only 2 cities in the country that have that. One is Chicago and the other is Memphis, Tennessee. So why would I vote for something that would disadvantage my state when it comes to rail and river and road and runway dollars? And the answer is I will not.
Now, Senator, even if they sweetened the deal for Tennessee, even if they gave you a complete cleanup of Oak Ridge, which is going to be very expensive, for example, or they put it all in the infrastructure bill, I'd still say to you, and even the Republican senator who got the best deal, wait a minute, the Republican Party does not want to get bait and switched, meaning, okay, we have a great compromise, that's wonderful, but the reconciliation, if they just go and stick paid child care leave for everybody and preschool mandatory money and money for critical race theory into the reconciliation, that's not a compromise, that's a swindle, and we're the marks.
Well, you're right about that. And we just have to keep the pressure on them, and we have to remind them they do not have a mandate. See, they're trying to act as if they have a mandate. They don't have a mandate. We've got an equally divided 50-50 Senate, and they need to be reminded of that every single day. They are in an equally divided Senate, and Republicans need to act like that.
Senator, I want to switch to foreign affairs. I asked Senator Marshall, I'll ask you as well. Have you ever been to the island state of Taiwan? Do you plan on going to visit it?
Oh, I've been to Taiwan a couple of times and had hoped to get back over there in this summer and was not able to get over there when I had tried at Memorial Day. But we'll get back over that direction. We've worked closely with Taiwan. The state of Tennessee has some participation with some business interest. I know there are some employers in the state that are closely tied to Taiwan, and we continue to support them and support their efforts and support their stand against China and support them being involved with the WHO because they're the ones that most effectively combated COVID from the start.
Now, many people are worried that President Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, will order an invasion of China sometime in the next 6 years. Indeed, Senator Cotton worries about the immediate aftermath of the Olympics in 2022 in Beijing because of what Putin did to Crimea and Ukraine after the Sochi Olympics in 2014. Should the United States be unequivocal in its commitment to come to the defense of Taiwan in the face of a hostile attempt to take it over?
They should be. They should stand solidly with Taiwan, just as we should be more forceful against the Chinese Communist Party when it comes to dealing with the genocide being committed against the Uyghurs, when it comes to what China has done to the Hong Kong freedom fighters, the violence that they have instigated in Tibet and Inner Mongolia. We should call them out more forcefully when it comes to the South China Sea. The Chinese Communist Party is really quite aggressive in their push to global dominance. And policymakers need to realize if you give China any opening at all, or as my grandmother would have said, if you give them an inch, they will take a mile.
Now, Senator, our first line of defense against the CCP is on the water in the United States Navy. We're down to 282 to 285 ships. China produces more warships in a month than we do in a year, and we're cutting back our shipbuilding in a year where we're spending trillions of dollars and we can't get the Shipyard Act through. Now, Senator Marshall wasn't very sympathetic to that, and we'll talk about that in the future, but what is your opinion of the Navy budget? Because every expert I have seen says it is radically underfunded, and the expansion and the plans are all about 2045 when they've got to be about 2023.
Well, you're precise on that. And I brought this issue with our nuclear fleet up with Secretary Austin last week when he came before us at SASC for a budget hearing. What they're doing is putting money into R&D, nuclear R&D. And this deals with our fleet, our submarines. What they are not doing is putting money into maintenance and continuation and production, which is today. And, you know, they can talk about having a green Navy all they want to. Hugh, what we need is a blue water Navy that is going to be solid in its ability to defend and support the other divisions of the U.S. military.
And, Senator, this was one of the failures of the Trump administration. I like to give credit where credit is due, but the Trump administration produced a plan for a 355-ship Navy, but they actually didn't expand the Navy. In fact, it shrunk to a size lower than President Obama had projected for it. We have to spend money on ship construction. As you say, by the way, you're 100% right. Ship maintenance. We don't even, there are Virginia-class submarines that cannot get their annual or their regularly scheduled retrofitting and overhaul and life extension because there aren't any shipyards to do it at. That's a money problem. And we're spending trillions of dollars on stuff we don't need, and we're not spending it on the Navy.
Well, and you have to have the Navy because they are going to be working with your Air Force, with your Army, with the Coast Guard, with these different divisions. We're now working towards standing up a Space Force, which is the right thing to do, and President Trump was right about that. But all of this maintenance, and you mentioned the Virginia class, well, Hugh, all of this maintenance is on a contracted basis. And many of these are 2 or 3 year contracts as these ships come in for this scheduled maintenance. It's like anything else. It's like any of your listeners that own a building, a commercial building, or own a home. They schedule maintenance, and they don't look at it just as this summer we need to do this. They look at a plan. When are we going to need to replace appliances or repair the roof or do some foundation work? And that is the same way that the Navy deals with these ships. And then they schedule it and they go ahead and contract it. Well, if you eliminate this contracting authority because you're not putting the maintenance dollars then, well, you don't have ships in the water. You have ships that are in port.
100% agree. I hope any compromise on infrastructure includes the Shipyard Act, and I hope that you get the Navy fully funded. Senator Blackburn, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. That's our music for Vladimir Putin, who said this yesterday.
Oh, there is no happiness in life. There's only a mirage of it on the horizon. So, cherish that.
Here, Jim Talent, senator from Missouri in the past. What'd you make of Vlad's dark and gloomy view of the world?
Well, I loved you tweeting out your interview with Cheney, where he said he's got the soul of a KGB agent, which is true. It's one of the reasons I would not do these summits with Putin, and I certainly would not ask him for it, because when you go into these authoritarians and complain about the same thing over and over again, which is essentially what we do. So our leaders, I think we're being strong. Biden thinks he's being strong. But what Putin hears is, oh, I'm really hurting you, and you don't know what to do about it, right? So I liked us just to act.
I want to remind people what Dick Cheney told me in 2014. Putin's KGB. It struck me the first time I saw him. It's never changed, and certainly his conduct over the years supports that. Putin was a colonel in the KGB, the Soviet secret police. That's what he was and will be, I think, forever. That's how he operates. I think Dick Cheney had his number, and when W first tried to work with him, by the time he left, he was at the Olympics in China and stared him down over Georgia. And since that time, I don't think we've actually had his number again.
Well, that's right. And just generally speaking, I mean, this is an attribute of Russian diplomacy. If you want to come to an agreement with them, you show them first that you can hurt them. And there's lots of things we could do. I mean, look, Putin plays a weak hand well, but this is not China, okay? And there's lots of things we could do to impose costs and consequences on him that we're not doing. And I think if we did that in a relatively short period of time, he'd be calling us up for a summit. And that's when you deal with them.
That is right out of Nixon's The Real War. So, Senator, let's go to the Navy. I had a disturbing conversation with Senator Marshall earlier today. He's rather indifferent to the needs of the Navy, and maybe it's landlocked Kansas, but you're from Missouri. You got a river. But, what's the deal with Senator Marshall? Doesn't every Republican senator know that the Navy is the front line here with China?
Well, I think the knowledge of that is migrating well out into the conference. I'm actually quite hopeful that the Republicans are going to take the line that we need the 3 to 5% real increase in the defense budget that Jim Mattis recommended, and that we should remember the Strategy Commission, the Edelman-Ruffhead Commission 2.5 years ago recommended, and Kath Hicks was a member of that commission. She's now the deputy secretary over at DOD. So I think it's going to be the Republican position. It needs to be the Republican position. But I will say this, that the members of the Armed Services Committee and the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee need to make an effort to be communicating constantly with the other members of the conference on this, because to be fair, if you're not on that committee or Foreign Affairs, you're not dealing with this every day. And
I agree.
But you have to stick to your priorities in the Congress. And by the way, I was the chairman of the Sea Powers Subcommittee. I had a lot of fun with that around Missouri. I got a lot of kids about it.
Good for you. And I wish every senator took a view that every United States is interested in places like Taiwan, because if we stop getting semiconductors from Taiwan, every American business will suffer. I've been asking, and I'll ask Senator Cruz at the top of the hour, have you been to Taiwan? Are you planning on going? What do you think Republican senators ought to be doing right now, Jim Talent, vis-a-vis Taiwan?
Well, I think going to Taiwan is a good thing. I think doing whatever we can to show support of a symbolic nature you can't change the diplomatic status. That's a major change in policy. I think that's a good idea. But I also think that the problem is, and you know this better than anybody else, certainly in the media, is that we're outgunned, outranged, and outmanned in Indo-PACOM. And we have to address the balance of power, and not 10 years from now, which is the problem with the DOD priorities. We got to do it right away, and that means we got to get more precision ammunition based in Indo-PACOM. We have to harden our own targets. We have to strengthen our ISR. There are things we could be doing, and we need to do it right away. Because I don't think, I agree with Admiral Davidson. I don't think the Chinese schedule is 2034. That's the only thing wrong with Jim Stavridis' book.
You mean his novel? And he agrees with that, by the way. It could be 2022. It could be after the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, look, they're going to be opportunistic. Now, the general view is that they don't yet have the shipping to land the number of troops they need to land. And I don't think they're going to go until they're confident that they can win, even if the United States intervenes. But they're working hard to remedy that shortfall. And we don't know at what point. Yeah,
They are. And we need Senator Marshall to have a good dinner with you, Senator Talent. Hey, everyone, I'm coming right back. Stay tuned. Ted Cruz is next. America on the Hugh Hewitt Show. The interview today is with United States Senator Ted Cruz from the state of Texas. Good morning, Senator. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. Good to be with you.
Let's start by getting your impression of the meeting between President Putin and President Biden.
I thought it was stunningly poor and disturbing. I think this foreign policy trip caps what has been 5 months of just disaster upon disaster. And in fact, I think it's striking because if you look at the record of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we've seen in just 5 short months, we've seen a border crisis. We've seen gas lines. We are seeing a burgeoning inflation crisis. We're seeing a spending crisis that's out of control. And the amazing thing is, as bad as the domestic and economic policy is, I think there's a good argument that the foreign policy has been even worse. That in 5 months, we have not seen a litany of foreign policy failures in such a short period of time since Jimmy Carter was president. And the reason for the foreign policy failures is the same reason Jimmy Carter had his foreign policy failures, which is the premises that Biden and Harris are operating under are exactly wrong. What they've managed to do in 5 months is alienate our friends and allies and appease and show weakness and offer to send money to our enemies. With regard to Putin,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the Sweet 16 list that President Biden gave to President Putin, I hope TedCruz.org and HughHewitt.com are on that list. Otherwise, we're fair game for cyber attacks from Russia. I was sort of astonished by that. Here's what you can't hit. The implied message is everything else is fair game.
It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Imagine you walked into a jewelry store and they handed you a list. Mr. Hewitt, here are the 16 things you cannot steal. You'd look around and be like, okay, this is kind of interesting. I mean, it's not even complicated, the weakness that projects. And what do you think Putin thinks as you know, Biden totters over there to hand him that list? It is, any new president is tested. That is always the case. And he's tested by our enemies, and even to some extent, he's tested by our friends. And
well,
right now, Biden is failing those tests over and over again.
I'd like you to comment on the exchange that the president had with CNN's Caitlin Collins. Let's play it for the audience. Cut number 2.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin?
You don't understand that. You're in the wrong business.
Is the summit with China?
So, Senator Cruz, what'd you think of that exchange?
Well, look, he didn't call her a lying, dog-faced pony soldier, so, you know, I guess that was good. It actually was very revealing. When she asks about what is it that's going to make Putin change, he said, well, you know, if he doesn't have the full respect of the community of nations. What utter garbage. So, unlike Biden, Putin is not some terrifying little campus lefty who wants everyone in the faculty lounge to like him. I mean, that's Biden's foreign policy. As he went over to Europe, and his approach to all the people of Europe is, like me, please, and what will I do to make you like me, please? Anything you want. What would you like me to do? I mean, we're America, for God's sakes. And listen, the Putin meeting was a disaster, but it was a disaster before Biden walked in the room. Why is that? Because Putin had already won. His number one geopolitical objective, by far, was to finish building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This is a massive natural gas pipeline that Putin is building between Russia and Germany. And a year and a half ago, Congress passed bipartisan sanctions to stop that pipeline. I know this well because I authored those sanctions. I wrote the sanctions. We got Republicans on board. We got Democrats on board in the Senate, in the House, passed it overwhelmingly, virtually unanimously. President Trump signed those sanctions into law. The sanctions were signed at 7 p.m. on a Thursday. The pipeline, they halted construction at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the law was signed, they halted construction. So the sanctions worked, stopped them in their tracks. For over a year, Hugh, that pipeline sat dormant. It was a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. Joe Biden gets elected in November, and immediately his foreign policy team begins signaling weakness to Germany, to Russia, and within weeks of Biden's getting elected, Putin starts building the pipeline again. Now, I didn't just pass one set of bipartisan sanctions, I passed two, because in December of last year, we passed even tougher sanctions to shut them down. So what happened? These are mandatory sanctions passed overwhelmingly bipartisan through Congress. What happened? Joe Biden decided he didn't want to tick off Germany. He didn't want to tick off Putin. And so he waived the sanctions. He signed a waiver, a national security waiver, that gave the green light for Putin to finish the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. What does that mean? That decision was a generational geopolitical blunder. For the next 40, 50 years, Putin and the next tyrant who comes behind him will have billions of dollars a year of revenue in their pocket because Joe Biden gave it to them as a birthday present. They will have the power to use economic blackmail over Europe, and Putin is more than happy to do so. And in the meantime, they are destroying jobs here at home. It was the most spectacular act of weakness, and that is entirely on Joe Biden. In fact, it's been reported, even his own State Department, and the State Department is not known for having rock-ribbed conservatives, to put it mildly. Even his own State Department was arguing, impose the sanctions, it's the law, and the White House overrode them politically. Joe Biden overrode them and said, nope, we're going to give this as a gift to Putin. And so when Biden walked into Putin, Putin was already laughing because Biden had already given him everything in exchange for nothing. That's what he thinks is diplomacy, is giving billions of dollars to your enemies. Everybody else understands that's just weakness.
Former Vice President Cheney, Senator Cruz, was my guest on this program in 2014, and he said about Putin, he's KGB. It struck me the first time I saw him, it's never changed, and certainly his conduct over the years supports that. Putin was a colonel in the KGB, the Soviet secret police. That's what he was and will be, I think, forever. That's how he operates. Agree or disagree?
100% agree. And one of the other exchanges in the press conference that Biden did, I think this was a day or two ago, Biden was asked at a press conference in Europe before the Putin meeting, is Putin still a killer? And if you watch the video, it is, I think, 28 seconds. And Biden just sort of stares, panicked and unsure of what to say, and he meanders. And he goes, I mean, it's the most bizarre. For 28 seconds, he says nothing. And it's another manifestation of what we were talking about a minute ago, which is the weakness that Biden is projecting to our enemies. I'll tell you what Biden should have said when he's asked, is Putin still a killer? He should have said, absolutely, of course he is. He is a KGB thug. That's who he's been from the day he rose to power. And we are going to treat him accordingly. But that doesn't mean we're going to go to war and send the Marines into Moscow. But it does mean we understand who Putin is, that he is not our friend, that he is our enemy, and the only thing he respects is strength. What Ronald Reagan, my political hero, your political hero, demonstrated so powerfully is peace through strength, that when you're dealing with bullies and tyrants, don't follow the strategy of appeasement, of groveling, of giving them everything they want, but rather negotiate from a position of strength where you're strong enough that they don't want to mess with you. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fundamentally don't understand that. It's as if they attended the Neville Chamberlain School of Foreign Policy, because that's how they're approaching it all.
Let's stay on foreign affairs, Senator. I want to turn to Taiwan. Have you visited it? Will you visit it again? And ought we to repudiate the so-called policy of strategic ambiguity and be unambiguous in our commitment to the defense of Taiwan should General Secretary Xi decide to move against it in a hostile, overt way?
Yes, yes, and hell yes.
Okay, I like that.
And let me explain why I think Taiwan matters so much. Taiwan is critical for dealing with China. China is the single greatest geopolitical threat facing the United States today and for the next century. Two light posts on China are Taiwan and Hong Kong. They are both right on the edge of China. Hong Kong literally attached, Taiwan right off the coast. They are both nations where the people are ethnically Chinese, but they have embraced free enterprise. They have embraced democracy. They have embraced freedom, and they enjoy incredible prosperity. And that prosperity is an existential threat to Xi and the Communist Party dictators. Why? Because it tells 1.3 billion Chinese, wait a second, those guys are just like me. They're ethnically Chinese. They might be my cousins. And they're living in incredible prosperity, and I'm living in incredible poverty. What's wrong with my system? Why is communism so much worse than what they have? It's why China hates and fears Taiwan. It's why they hate and fear Hong Kong. Now, we saw Xi move brutally to repress and crush Hong Kong. You asked about visiting Taiwan. So October 2 years ago, I traveled and did an Asia tour. I went to Pearl Harbor, then Japan, then Taiwan, then India, then Hong Kong. And that was designed to be really a friends and allies tour, a meeting with major friends and allies all surrounding China. The entire purpose of the trip was to discuss how do we combat the growing threat of China, economic, diplomatic, military, theft and criminal, all of that was the topic of discussion everywhere. The question you just raised was a question I asked at every spot, and in Pearl Harbor I met with the head of the Pacific Band, and I asked at every spot, what do we do if amphibious ships land on the shores of Taiwan? In Taiwan, I was there on their National Day, which is the celebration of their independence. Was the first senator in 34 years to be there on Taiwan's National Day. I stood alongside President Tsai as they had a parade celebrating their independence. And I think it is incredibly important to strengthen Taiwan. And let me tell you something Biden has already done to weaken Taiwan. So let's go back 6 years. Let's go back to 2015 during the Obama administration. China is threatened by Taiwan, and China threw a fit that they were upset that Taiwan, that they were upset at Taiwan, and they demanded that Obama implement a new policy, and Obama complied. And the new policy is anyone from Taiwan, if they are on a U.S. base, if they're on U.S. land, like if they're here in the State Department, they can have no symbols of sovereignty. That means they can't display a Taiwanese flag. That means their military officers can't wear their uniforms if they have any insignia that show that they are military officers for Taiwan, because China embraces this bizarre fiction that Taiwan doesn't exist, that it's part of China. It's an utter lie, but the Obama administration decided to appease China and said, we're going to ban all symbols of sovereignty. All right, fast forward to the Trump administration. First 3 years of the Trump administration, they maintained that policy. I pressed the Trump administration hard, repeatedly, end this policy. This policy is stupid. It makes no sense. You should allow Taiwan, like everybody else, to display their symbols of sovereignty. Don't make them hide their flag. Don't make them hide their uniforms. At the end of the Trump administration, they agreed. Secretary Mike Pompeo, I've been pressing him for his entire tenure on this. On the way out the door, he agreed. He issued a new ruling, a new guidance that said Taiwan, just like everybody else, can display their symbols of sovereignty. Biden comes in. What did the Biden administration do? Reverse the policy. They went back and said, nope, we will no longer allow Taiwan to display their flags, to wear their military uniforms on U.S. soil. Why? Because it might offend President Xi. That weakness, and I just had a State Department nominee in my office yesterday and spent about 30 minutes unloading on him on this topic, where I said, listen, she sees that weakness as a signal what Biden will do if they invade Taiwan. And there are two things that I am deeply concerned about that I think there's a real possibility will happen in the next 4 years before the end of 2024. Number one, I think there's a real possibility the Ayatollah Khamenei will develop a nuclear weapon, that they've taken a measure of Joe Biden. They think he's too weak to respond, and so they're going to rush to get a nuke before Biden's gone. And number two, I think there is a distressingly high possibility that China will militarily invade Taiwan for exactly the same reason, that Xi has taken a measure of Biden, and he doesn't believe there will be any meaningful consequences. And those of us in the Congress have to do everything we can to dissuade Xi, to dissuade Khamenei that their assessment is wrong. But when the commander-in-chief is weak and engages in appeasement, it invites military conflict. It invites the bad guys to be even worse.
So, Senator, we have 6 minutes left, and I want to turn from what I consider to be the two most important issues in the 2024 cycle, China and Russia, to the 2024 cycle. A quick question and a longer question. The quick question, have you ruled out running for president in 2024? I believe the answer is no. And the longer question, David Bossie, who is on the RNC and is a member of the committee, the chair of the committee dealing with debates for 2024, both primary and general election, was my guest on Friday. He said on that show that the networks have to be decoupled from the Republican debates, that those debates have to be run by people like me who are center-right journalists who ask questions of which the Republican primary electorate is interested. And there are others, Guy Benson, Mary Catherine Ham, Ben Shapiro, you name it. There are lots of us, although, of course, I should probably be the host. Do you agree with Bossie about the primary debates? No network. They can cover them. They can carry them, but we get to pick the hosts and the people asking the questions. And B, do you agree with Bossie that the Presidential Debate Commission has either got to be top to bottom reformed or done away with because they are in the pockets of Democrats?
Absolutely. Emphatically agree. This is something I've been calling for years. And there's a very simple rule that makes a lot of sense and would dramatically change these debates, which is that I think anybody moderating a Republican primary debate in the presidential race should be somebody who intends to vote in the Republican primary. That is a mild, simple step. Right now, the status quo, let's take the last election, 100% of the people asking questions of the Democrats in their primary, 100% of those people voted in the Democratic primary. They're all liberal Democrats. If you have liberal Democrats asking Democrats questions.
Now, you're guessing that, though. You don't know that for sure. You're guessing.
I don't know that. I don't know that for sure, but I know that they're all wildly left. I know George Stephanopoulos was a senior aide at the Clinton White House and has been a Democrat since he was in short shorts. So did I pull their voting records? No, but I know the people, and they're all liberal Democrats. Here's the maddening thing. On the Republican side, that was very close to the case as well.
In 2016, there was me and Mary Catherine Ham. In 2016. By the way, I voted in the Democratic. I voted for the Democratic primary in 2020. I voted for Bernie Sanders, so I hope that doesn't DQ me. But you're right. You need to have Republicans asking Republican candidates questions.
And the reason is simple. Look, if you're asking questions, or Mary Catherine, or Ben Shapiro, or Mark Levin, or Sean Hannity, or any of a host of people who are actual conservatives, if you're asking questions, you guys aren't going to ask softballs. You're going to ask hard questions. But the Democrats who moderate Republican primary debates, their objective, they want everyone on that stage to lose. So their objective is, you're all idiots, you're all racist, you're all imbeciles, you're all horrible people. My objective is make sure the American people see how horrible you are so the Democratic nominee wins. If you have actual Republicans engaged, look, Hugh, that Republican primary voters are trying to make a choice in an election. All right, who do I want to back? And you know some of the issues they care about. And it's not the relentless attacks from moderators. And by the way, it's not just in the primaries, in the general election. Trump's debates with Biden, every moderator there is a Democrat. By the way, people think Chris Wallace, because he's on Fox News, is somehow a Republican. Chris Wallace is a Democrat. He's been a liberal Democrat his entire life, and he may have been the worst moderator of the entire debate. He despised Trump and made himself the topic rather than the candidate.
This is why, Senator, this is why I asked about the triad in the 2016 primary debates and why I would ask about Taiwan. I telegraph what I'm going to ask about because Taiwan is the issue of the day and maybe the Columbia class. I ask about defense, national security, and judges. I asked you about judges in 2016 because judges matter to our base. the center-left journalists of mainstream media do not know much about judges and do never ask that question. And in the Democratic primaries, I think they had 3 questions on COVID. And I'd been covering, that's all I would have asked about.
Yep. Well, so I think for the primaries, we should have moderators who are going to vote in the Republican primary. I think for the general election, rather than pretend all the lefty journalists that they have there are not lefty journalists, I think we should just own the partisanship. And so each side should get one. So rather than 3 lefty journalists, we should have a debate moderated by Ben Shapiro and Chris Hayes.
That's wrong. And Hugh Hewitt and Chris Hayes, but that's okay.
All right, we have 3 debates, so I'm all good. We can do Hugh Hewitt and Chris Cuomo.
Okay.
And it would be abundantly clear that, look, you're right of center. You're going to ask some tough questions to the Democrats. That's okay. The lefty's going to ask some tough questions to the Republicans. And owning the bias rather than engaging in a farce, which nobody believes anymore. I mean, the press doesn't pretend. They are Democratic mouthpieces. They are nothing more. CNN is part of the Democratic Party. They are the left arm of the Democratic Party. They do 2 things. They cheer on Biden and Harris, and they lobby them to go further left. That is the entire role of CNN, and they attack any and all Republicans at all times. They are a professional lying machine.
Now, Senator,
Trump
did
that for us. He made it naked.
He did. Let me close with a tough question. Matthew McConaughey is considering running for governor. Would he be a formidable candidate for Greg Abbott? And why would he be if you indeed conclude that he is?
Yeah, no, I think he would undoubtedly be formidable. I hope Matthew decides not to run. I am a big fan of Greg Abbott. He was my boss for 5.5 years. He's a close friend and mentor. And I like Matthew personally. I know him a little bit, not well, but I spent a little bit of time with him. And he's a very charming, very affable guy. He's a movie star, and a good-looking, charming, affable movie star can be a really formidable candidate on the ballot. And I hope that doesn't happen. But you know what? He's going to have to make his own decision whether he's going to run or not.
All right, my very last question. We have a minute and a half. It's a hard break, Senator. The Navy is getting screwed. And we've spent $4 trillion. We're on our way to $7 trillion. And we haven't even fully funded last year's Navy budget, and we're underfunded. Are you going to fix that in this so-called compromise infrastructure talk?
The honest answer is no. If you look at Joe Biden and the Biden budget they put in, they're asking for increases on spending in just about everything. And dead last, literally after every other agency, dead last are the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security. They are their dead last priorities. They don't want to spend on defense. They don't want to spend on the Navy. They haven't yet come out with gutting the military, but I expect in the next 4 years for them to propose serious cuts in military spending. And the problem is Biden decided at the start of his presidency to hand the agenda over to the extreme left. And so the people driving the agenda are Bernie Sanders, are Elizabeth Warren, are AOC. It is the radicals. It's the extreme. And I think Biden made a judgment. That's where the energy and passion in the Democratic Party is. And so they get to drive the train. I don't see any chance of the Democrats agreeing to significant increases in military spending. When Republicans had the White House and both houses of Congress, we passed that end of the law and invested serious amounts of money into rebuilding the military. You're right, we need to do more, but there's a consequence to electing Democrats to the White House.
There certainly is.
Leading the Senate and the House. And it's a dangerous 2 years and a dangerous 4 years for the country.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you. Come back to the interview. Keep coming back. I appreciate your time.
Take care. God bless.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I'm playing happy music because Vladimir Putin is very depressed. Let's play that clip from yesterday's press conference.
Oh, there is no happiness in life. There's only a mirage of it on the horizon. So, cherish that.
So, I don't know why he's so depressed. It might be because he expected a fight and he didn't get a fight. I'm joined by Congresswoman Liz Cheney of the great state of Wyoming. Congresswoman, Vladimir Putin dominated yesterday. What was your assessment of that meeting?
Well, hi, Hugh. It's always great to be with you. And yeah, I found that comment, probably pretty telling in terms of where Putin's mind is these days. But look, I think it was unfortunate that President Biden decided to sort of jump right in to go to this meeting with Putin. We kind of see this again and again where U.S. presidents don't recognize that meeting with somebody, meeting with Putin, gives him a gift. It basically gives him a platform on the world stage. And I think that, Biden needs to be clear with his actions that there are things that Putin and the Russians are doing that we won't stand for. Certainly the cyber attacks are among those. But actions matter. Just going to have a meeting, there did not seem to be a lot of strategic thinking involved ahead of time or at the meeting. And, I think there were some other things Biden should have been doing rather than that.
Congresswoman Cheney, I have been quoting last night on Twitter and this morning on the show an interview I conducted with your father in 2014. The quote is about Putin, he's KGB. The former vice president said, "It struck me the first time I saw him, it's never changed, and certainly his conduct over the years supports that. Putin was a colonel in the KGB, the Soviet secret police. That's what he was and will be, I think, forever. That's how he operates." I don't think anything has changed since your father talked to me in 2014. Do you?
No, it certainly hasn't. And I mean, you can just look at what's happening today with Ukraine, look at what's happening today with Navalny. Gary Kasparov, who's been, a longtime Russian dissident, obviously chess grandmaster, has made the suggestion, which I agree with, that Biden ought to go meet with Navalny's family. Biden should meet with Zelensky. He needs to, be thinking through what are the actions that we can take that demonstrate to Vladimir Putin that he is isolated, that the way that he's conducting himself is not something that we're going to tolerate, and that, his efforts to convey to the Russian people that Russia somehow has a place on the world stage with him at its head are going to be unsuccessful. And I think we need to recognize what he is, and that's exactly right. He's a KGB agent.
I want to talk about one specific thing that the president did, and I try to be nonpartisan about my critiques of national security matters, but he handed him a list of 16 vital hands-off. I sure hope HughHewitt.com was on that list because I don't want to be fair game for the Russian mafia, et cetera, but I'm afraid I'm not. And it's sort of like Dean Acheson leaving Korea out of that famous speech that Stalin misread. What did you make of that list?
Yeah, I saw the news coverage of that, and I think it's a mistake. I think it is basically sending a message of, as long as you don't hit these people or hit these entities on this list, then, you're not going to have a response from us. And I think it's much, much more effective for us to be very clear that there will be a response, that we do have the capability to conduct offensive cyber operations, that we're doing it, that we're not going to alert you that we're doing it, but that, this is it's a new era, a new kind of warfare. And if you're going to engage in it against us, you had better be prepared for the fact that, we may well preemptively engage in those kinds of activities against you. But I think if you look at the whole list, the fact that Biden lifted sanctions on Nord Stream, the fact that he extended New START for 5 years, really actions matter. And it doesn't matter nearly so much what Biden says to Putin privately or publicly. It's how he conducts himself, what he does. And so far, the record is not one that I think will give Putin the concept that we're operating from a position of strength.
Congresswoman Cheney, I'm asking everyone who might be running for president in 2024, and I think that includes you. Have you ruled out running for president in 2024?
I don't have any announcement to make, Hugh, but I haven't ruled anything in or out, certainly.
All right. So I'm asking everyone with that answer this. Have you been to Taiwan? Do you plan on going to Taiwan? And do we need to abandon the policy of strategic ambiguity vis-a-vis Taiwan?
I've not been to Taiwan. I would very much like to go. Would hope to be able to do that soon. And look, I think that we have to be very clear that we will defend Taiwan. Taiwan is a thriving democracy. We've watched the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government make increasingly aggressive and hostile actions towards Taiwan. And, we have to be absolutely clear that when we make a commitment for the defense of an ally, as we have with respect to Taiwan, that we will keep it. And I think that the policy of strategic ambiguity may, at this point, leave the Chinese government with a perception that should be incorrect, that, somehow we won't defend Taiwan. I think it's very important for them to understand that we will.
There's also a perception growing out of the systemic underfunding of the Navy, and this was a failure of the Trump years, and I've said it many times. They had a great plan for 355 ships. They just didn't fund it. There was no production schedule, and now it's getting worse. The Navy is the front line in great power competition, Congresswoman. I don't know if you agree with that or not. And we are not funding the Navy, whether or not you agree with it. That's just objectively true.
It is true. And actually what we've seen, I heard a little bit of Senator Cruz's, the tail end of the interview there. We are actually seeing a cut in defense spending. If you look at it from the perspective of real growth and inflation, we know we've got to have 3 to 5% annual real growth in the budget. And that number is in order to be able to carry out the missions that were laid out several years ago in the National Defense Strategy. And so, the National Defense Strategy of 3 or 4 years ago, the world has certainly changed since then. We've obviously had COVID we've had to deal with, and we've seen the Chinese in particular, but also the Russians make huge gains and make, massive and significant investments across the board, including in their nuclear forces. So I think that, we're right now going through all of the posture hearings in the Armed Services Committee, but people in Congress need to recognize, the American people need to recognize that the budget that the Biden administration has proposed for the Navy and for the other services and for nuclear modernization is insufficient to be able to defend ourselves, to be able to maintain the superiority that we count on to defend ourselves from our adversaries.
Now, Congresswoman Cheney, I also asked Senator Cruz about a David Bossie interview I did a week ago tomorrow, Friday. David Bossie is chairing the Republican National Committee on the rules for the 2024 cycle, including the primary debates and the general election debates. He does not want the networks to control the Republican primary debates. He wants center-right moderators like myself, Ben Shapiro, Mary Catherine Ham, Guy Benson. There are lots of them. Just so long as I'm on the list, that's all I care about. I'm selfish. But do you agree with him about the primary debates ought to be moderated by and questions posed by center-right moderators who are not, ridiculously biased against the candidates? Do you think that would be a good modification?
Yeah, look, I haven't seen David's proposal. I think it's really important. Obviously, all the people that you named, I'm big fans of. I think they're terrific. And would all of them do a great job moderating debates? I do think it's unfortunate, though, that we've gotten into a place, and I think this is a much bigger problem we have for politics and society generally, a place where, there are too few people like you, Hugh, too few people who are really going to look at issues and do it objectively. And, just think about what it means that, as we look at our primary debates, we're talking about, are we going to have conservative or liberal moderators? I think it's certainly important that we not have moderators that are, just there, who are there to make the Republican candidates look bad, there to score points with liberals. But I think it's, part of a larger problem we have that, we need to get back to the days where there was objectivity and frankly, truth in reporting. And of course, you and the people you listed reflect that, but there are too few of you these days, and I think that's something we really need to look at how we can change that as a country.
Both Ronna McDaniel and Bossie also are of the opinion that the Presidential Debate Commission either needs to be radically reformed or done away with in its control of the debates because it simply is not fair. Now, I think some of the criticism of it, to preface, is more unfair. I think Steve Scully would have been a fine moderator. But generally speaking, over the years, your father, George W. Bush, President Trump, they all get jobbed in this. They all get the short end of the deal. What should we do about the PDC? They have a monopoly and they're not up to it.
I mean, look, I was part of the team that negotiated the terms of the debates. Jim Baker led the effort for the vice presidential debates and presidential debates in the 2000-2004 cycle. And I think that, part of it is you got to have somebody good who's negotiating the terms. And I think that, it's important for whatever the Presidential Debate Commission's role is, that they play that role objectively. But at the end of the day, in my experience, the complaints that go on, when candidates are complaining about the terms or the rules of the debate, they're probably losing. Ultimately, the American people want the candidates to be able to stand up on the stage, explain why they are running for whatever office it is, and lay out their vision and their view for the future. And I sort of think a lot of this other stuff is background noise.
The very best debate in that whole sequence was between then Senator Lieberman and your father in the first vice presidential debate, the only vice presidential debate in 2000. It was the best debate in the last 20 years, and it was one moderator, and I don't remember who it is, probably McNeil.
It was Bernie Shaw.
Okay, there you go. I don't remember that. That's the way it should be.
Exactly. Yeah, because one of the reasons that was such a good debate was because he let them talk. And so they went back and forth. It was a conversation. They really did lay out their views of the world. And that's how debates ought to be. It shouldn't be the moderators trying to score points and get attention. I think that serves the American people best.
100% agree. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, thank you for joining me. Keep coming back. I appreciate the time.